It's a weird gap between you and I, maybe we'll just, you can move down, absolutely, and yeah, if you want to do that. But Darren's kind a little bit,
For now, yeah.
well, for right now, I'll just switch and then I'll go from there. Our voices seem louder than usual.
I wasn't super disappointed.
And if you have a device, I just posted all of the handouts electronically on the on the agenda, which if you go to the website and you want to just look under work session, the agenda will be there, and you can look at the items there as well. Yeah. So then I just put them in case there they are, in case somebody wants to look at these. See. But that's just me bringing a short report. Should be back at the meeting are at 8 p.m. So that just kind of, you guys have, I shared that with you in case people want to hear. And Jose, we will be having, oh, I think I see them there already. Bruce Kabrick is joining us. Josh Mack is joining us, and Callie Beckman is joining us from home as well.
You see third gentleman down.
Yeah, yes, I'm sure that's who it is. Yes, welcome. Good to see you.
Call to order the Charles City Community School District Board work session for March 4th. Quick roll call.
Yes.
Okay.
Callie, would you mind taking roll call?
Yep, President Schroep,
Here.
Vice President Yeager,
Here.
Board Member Fox,
Here.
Board Member Kabrick,
Here.
and Board Member Mack.
Here.
Thank you. Item number 1, fiscal year 25 certified budget discussion. I think Mr. Squires from Piper Jaffray.
Yes, I
And-
believe he is here to join us.
Chandler,
Welcome.
Jaffrey, whatever you want to call us is fine.
All right. You are on the floor.
Okay, very good. Let's see. Do I have ability to share screen? Looks like I do. With me one moment. I'll clean up my screen just a little bit here. So this is a little bit of a follow-up of recent conversations we've had with some of the administration team to walk through the budget forecast as we had looked at it. So looking at a 5-year planning horizon for the district. In this case, we've tied out to some of your preliminary budget numbers. And predominantly the one I would say outside thing we don't know yet is where the state is going to set what is commonly known as the allowable growth rate or the state supplemental assistance rate. So we do have to make a leap of an assumption right now, and right now that assumption is built in at 3. And in some ways that's dictated just based on the fact that produces the higher rate right now for the district. There are some districts where a 2.5% SSA rate actually produces a higher tax rate. And so going into this max levy hearing, we'd recommend setting that at the higher level. And I believe from
Travis, is there any way you could increase your volume? We're having a little trouble hearing you.
Oh, sorry. Let me try to plug this mic a little closer to my face and cheek. Is that a little bit better?
Still not yet. Can you get a little closer?
That's about me swallowing it. So I don't know if I got much more room. So let me try something real quick.
Are we full volume, Jose? We're full volume on our end. Well, we'll just have you use your big voice, Travis.
Okay. How is
Put a
it
microphone
now?
to
Is it any better now?
Not really. Let's see if we can figure out. Jose, can you help me pull maybe one of our board microphones over closer to him? I wouldn't want people in the room not to be able to hear. Is there a way for us to get this?
TV more that way.
Jose, if you can use this one, it might, if you can get it closer there to that speaker, sometimes I try that and it works. And if you need to use a chair or a table. Thank you.
Okay, so maybe, is that better for everyone?
Yeah, we might get some feedback. Let's try it. Can you do a test?
Yeah, test. We okay? How's it going? Does this work?
Yeah, it hasn't increased the volume, only the feedback, Jose. So I guess I'll have you take that back to the corner table here. Maybe there at the corner where Josh Mack's name is.
Is the speaker coming out of the computer? Is that what's going on?
I believe we're using the speaker out of our display, and then you have that one selected, correct, Jose? You want to try that, Travis?
Yeah, how's the volume now?
100% better, thank you.
Okay.
No, we
You
got
can lower it just a little, Jose. Thank you, sir.
All right, Travis, if you wouldn't mind revisiting what you were saying at the beginning.
Yeah, sure. I'll go back to the share screen. So I'll retrace just a little bit here. So we've been working with the district on a 5-year forecasting model that will outline outgoing expenditures, incoming revenues, and then produce a set of financial metrics that we view for financial health. One of the things that we've had to assume right now is an assumption that the state will provide you with a 3% SSA rate. If that is the case, we have certain spending set up. We have certain assumptions throughout regarding tax rate. and know that ultimately if the state does come back at a lower SSA rate, there are a few things that have to be revisited, but we have to have a good starting point. Seems like it's a coin flip right now. Hopefully may know by the end of the week what that looks like. But I think going into your budget hearing or your max levy notice, you should be selecting the SSA rate that will produce the highest property tax rate. Ultimately, you can back it down, but you can't increase the revenues from there. So most districts are taking the approach of looking at 2.5% or 3% and then using the higher of the two for this first max levy notice, knowing that this isn't the final adoption of the district's overall tax rate. So one of the things that we've looked through in terms of the district overview is trying to balance a couple, what I'll say, competing priorities that always exist. How do you deliver the best educational opportunities and spend the allowable dollars that are given to you by the state while remaining diligent to managing taxpayer resources? And, those sound like those should be things that are easy to have a trade-off on, and then you should be able to row both of them at the same time. The reality is that, funding your education program and spending your unspent authorized budget or your break-even spending each year sometimes does create some fluctuations in the property tax rate. One of the things that we have walked through with the district staff and others on the finance team are results that relate to the district's programming that isn't funded through the state formula, such as special education spending. And this is something that we speak to a lot of districts about. It's something important to help manage for tax rates, but ultimately it is a required service of public school districts to provide that level of service that's required by the student's IEP. So therefore, there are some fluctuations that do occur within the special education programming that can lead to changes in tax rate. So as we look at the district's overall position right now, one of the things that I'll point up and I'll try to zoom in here a little bit on a box that we have on each page of our model is related to some key indicators. One of the things that we have looked at in terms of key indicators for the district is your unspent authorized budget, often called spending authority, and that is something that results in the amount of money that you're allowed to spend per student. It's your primary fluctuations then are driven by, does the state give you 2.5% or 3% SSA? What happens with your enrollment and how much money do you spend? Those are really the main components that factor into unspent authorized budget. Now you might be saying, I don't ever like seeing numbers that are going down, and that would be a good observation. In this case, we are trying to operate under a scenario where perhaps your unspent authorized budget has a little bit of flexibility, and it could afford to drop closer to that 15% number. So that third line down, basically expressing how much balance do you have in reserve relative to how much spending authority do you get each year. Now, you might say, well, why do I have anything there? Well, fluctuations in enrollment over time, you often want some years to pivot. If you don't have a little bit of balance built up, let's say 15 to 25%, your ability to pivot is going to be difficult. So one of the things we do encourage districts to think about in terms of your overall budget is to determine a level that you would like to remain at. In this case, we're shooting to stay within that 15 to 25% range in your model, rate at 15 in year 5. Solvency ratio then is a close cousin to that, but it really represents how much cash you have in the bank. It's the top line unspent authorized budget that I would view as your most important target in terms of district spending, district budget management. Solvency ratio comes down to the ability to have reserves to pay for your unspent authorized budget usage or spending each year. And this may fluctuate. Most districts land somewhere between 5 and 25%. And when you get down to 5%, that often means increasing tax rates are needed. If you're at 25% or higher, that'll often mean your tax rate could have some downward pressure. In this case, we're trying to land ourselves in a nice ratio somewhere between 8 and 15%, right now ending at 11%. Our goal here when we look at budgets is try to make the best one-year decision with the 5-year plan in mind. In this case, the best one-year decision here is looking at a tax rate that will be slightly higher than last year, in part due to the fact that we believe going after more cash reserve levy, in fact, your maximum available cash reserve levy, is a prudent thing to do. Now, you might say, if we're going after the max cash reserve, do we have some other levers that we can perhaps reduce taxes in other areas? And my comeback there would be not really. And again, I'll walk to your tax rate side right now and just show you a couple of these other components with a little bit more expansion. And the one, I would say, lever that we might see often as a place to release would say, well, if I'm taking more cash reserve, might I be able to take less management fund? And what I would say right now is your management fund is actually sitting at about 26% of your annual expenditures, or that's the forecasted end of fiscal 24. And that sounds like a decent balance until you look at the way the cash flow works in the management fund, where you might spend 60% of your management fund expenditures for the year in July and August before you've received any of the property taxes. So we'll often see a lot of districts try to sit a little bit higher. Now, one thing you'll note in here is that we do show some deficits, which, you know, is I think one of the things that we've been talking with the district staff about is, you know, is 1.3 million the right number, or 1.6 million the right number for your management fund? 1.3 in fiscal 25 will move you to a good position. That being said, we are looking at more cash reserve needs out into the future. So that could be a position where right now we're showing the tax rate potentially needing to go up in 26 and then hopefully leveling off, but not really completely solving the management fund conundrum. We probably do need to look at taking a little bit more management fund over the next 5 years, whether you take more of that in 25 or have to increase a little bit more in 26, 27, 28. And 29, you know, I think that's the conversation that I wouldn't say we're punting to next year, but you do have some luxury to say we could hold off on that decision for another year. Conversely, you could decide, hey, let's go ahead and take more management fund this year. Yes, it's more than our annual spend, but we're going to need some of that balance as we try to move back and forth between how much cash do we need to meet the goal of building our solvency ratio and meet the need of our cash management fund balance. So it is a little bit of a delicate balancing act, but ultimately, you know, I think this plan accomplishes most of your goals, other than we need to chuck another couple $100,000 in your management fund to keep it solvent over the next few years, or conversely, manage expenses in the management fund. You know, there may be some areas within your management fund that you would say, you know, are we actually going to spend $1 million, 1.1 over the next couple years? You know, last year was closer to 730,000. You are budgeted closer to $1 million this year, and there are some new programs, I believe, that you took on in fiscal 24 that have increased some of that management fund expense. So again, it is a balancing act, and you're not far off on here. We're really about a couple 100,000 short on the management over the 5-year plan. But you will end up positive and in a good position in fiscal 25. Overall, there's a lot that we can go through in terms of where we're targeting spending. I think that's one of the most important components for the district to leave this with is, you know, we are trying to operate on, yes, you spent about $22 million next year, but as we look forward, you know, trying to spend right around your break-even budget, which we've got targets here as to where your break-even budget will be over the next couple of years based on enrollment assumptions. But looking by the time you get to 29 to make certain that that's balanced well, 23.8 million is the forecasted budget target when we get to 2029. Over this interim period, if you overspend your budget in these years by anything more than what I'm already illustrating, which is about 1% over, you will need to levy more cash reserve. It will put more pressure on your tax rate. So those are the key things on trying to balance how much can we spend going forward with, how much resources do we have. We have not illustrated a massive amount of cuts in 2025. However, going forward, there's going to have to be some adjustments. Now, I have modeled out some marking of moving things around, but ultimately I view this as a zero-sum game of you have to figure out the balance between salary increases, benefits, these other categories, and what we're assuming your break-even number is. This would show right now that there are the potential of looking at positions for attrition, managing how your employee benefits might flow through. Those are all important, aspects, and we're just trying to navigate what type of expenditure reductions would be necessary for break-even spending. The district moves forward with spending more than that, those amounts, you will have some difficulty in holding your tax rate even at that $14 per thousand range. So I'd love to be the bearer of good news. This isn't bad news, but it's reality, right? It's where we think your targets need to be to thread the needle on a viable financial solution. And certainly we're open to some questions here if you have them that you would like to address right now. Or Callie, and did you have anything you wanted to add?
Nope, you covered it all.
Okay.
Any questions from board members? Josh, Bruce? I don't think we have any questions, Travis.
I do have to have this to the Department of Management by March 15th. So that was what I'm going to be sending to them on March 15th is the 1338 for the tax rate. Just so you guys know.
Okay.
And again, I think there's a, flip a coin on amount of resources. Would we like to see you build your balance a little bit higher in the management to absorb what we think will be additional cash reserve needs? Yeah, that could be an option. That being said, I think this is still being honest and responsible with the taxpayers of asking for what you need. I think your 5-year plan would dictate you might need a little bit more management fund, but this is a 5-year model. There are a lot of assumptions into this model, including what will happen with enrollment, how will the state fund the budget, will you actually spend the amounts in the management fund that we have outlined? So I think you've got some, I'd call some work to do, and you can, I think, effectively move the ball down the road and make some of those difficult decisions, perhaps, when you get to the 26 budget. I don't think you have to solve everything today.
Travis?
Yeah.
Just Josh Mack, just maybe one quick question, as we're looking at assumptions and the future, one of the governor's conversations this year was around raising base teacher pay. And it was a pretty big jump for base teacher pay, something like $15,000 for starting teachers. So let's make an assumption, right? Because we're talking about assumptions for future. And let's say that goes through. How much of an impact to FY26 would we see in terms of how we would have to raise that additional capital?
Yeah, I think the area where you're probably going to run into raising additional capital or levy rates really comes down to where you end up on your spending authority. So I think one of the things that we have right now, as you'll note, we are actually showing the need for reductions, or we could look at it as additional revenues. So let's go ahead and play the additional revenue game, and let's say that produces the ability for you to pay. Let's say it magically works out that, it is as a bonus for you. It really adds $300,000 of miscellaneous income, let's call it. Now, we know for a fact that it's going to result in higher salaries. but maybe it works out that you're able to move people along the salary schedule appropriately and that funding is back to 100%. So if I take out one of the cuts, it really doesn't change, right? Because I think the additional revenue and state funding that you might receive will likely be impacted by having increased cost into your model. So I don't see that in itself making major changes. I think the one area where, you know, this could be effective here is, you know, does it change the way that we're able to, let's say, code some of our special education expenses? Because that really is the significant driver of the increase right now. Of if you were in a position where you were able to make some adjustments within your special education programming and the efficiency of that, you know, maybe, and for example, going into 2024, it looks like you're going to have additional 400,000 of weightings just generated through the formula. You may not run as large of a special ed deficit. And if that were to be the case, that would create a scenario where you do not need as much cash. And I would forecast that you might be able to end up in a scenario where your tax rate would stay close to where it is this year. So management of your special education program really probably represents the biggest opportunity. And I wouldn't say it's about cutting or adding, but you know, you are seeing some different numbers in your budget for this fall than what you had last year. So you could see a natural reduction in that special ed deficit that could provide some of that relief. So this is where I want to get ultra worked up on showing this tax increase to next year. And part of where we landed at maybe not shooting over the 1340 this year, I don't see a lot of scenarios where you go back under $13, given that your solvency ratio may only get up to about 5% next year. So you're going to have to not only just meet special ed deficit, but you do need to bring up your fund balance just a little bit to fall in line with targets. Not a lot. I mean, I think if you're 8 to 15%, you're in a good target range, but we don't get there till 2027 under the tax rate scenario we have right now. It's a really good question, Josh. I think if all of that goes on teacher pay, we will have to dust off the model. I think it could provide some relief, but the larger component to find relief and efficiency is probably within the special education programming, not necessarily cutting, but actually realizing some additional program receipts in your coding and just being efficient with the way you're running the program. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thanks.
Okay. Are there other questions? I do apologize. I have a hard stop here at 5:30. So.
Any other questions then? I think we're good, Travis.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we're happy to continue the dialogue. If you think of something after the meeting and you want to send some stuff to your administration staff with additional questions and clarity, we're happy to provide that for you all.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Callie, is there anything that you need to bring up?
Nope, I think he covered it all. I just want to let you guys know that I have to have it to the Department of Management by March 15th, and that's what I'll probably be sending. We lowered it to 1.3 to keep the tax rates under the 90-cent raise.
Right.
Like, what's the significance of the 90-cent raise?
Well, from 90 cents to 43 cents, we thought it'd be a little bit more like not as much weight on people if it was not so much. So, I mean, we'll be fine with 1.3 in there for next year.
Are we ready to go on to number 3 then? Everybody done with number 2? Number 3, first item is the proposed insurance
Actually, that's just really not for discussion so much, but just for background.
Yep.
Yes, let's open up the financial summary document instead.
All right.
And if it's helpful, this illustration will, I think, be meaningful to people who may, and it's very interesting, easy to understand for people who aren't as familiar with school finance as others. And then there is a proposed insurance adjustment only for discussion purposes that we've been working on for a couple of months with our interest-based bargaining team. But the document that really has the direction so far is our CSD financial summary. You heard from Travis about the current trends, and Callie has provided a snippet there. In round figures, it appears that we have revenue coming in of about 22 million and expenditures of about 23.7. So in order to adjust that, we probably need to be making a few adjustments. It's important to understand that enrollment and our estimated supplemental state aid, while enrollment is set from last October, our supplemental state aid will be set, we hope, in the next couple of weeks. While enrollment is down by 20 students for a total of certified enrollment of 1469, we also have a deficit in our open enrollment. We have 49 students enrolled in. Their money comes with them, as you know. We have 83 that have enrolled out as of last count day. That's a 34 student deficit. So that with the original 20 makes a fairly substantial change. It's noteworthy because until this year, there were only 2 years at the last 20 years where more students chose to go out voluntarily than chose to come in. And on those 2 occasions, one time it was a deficit for our district of 4 students, and the second time it was a deficit of 8. Having a deficit of 34 is pretty significant. And so we really have to do what we can to address any negative chatter around our programs and our school and our work, because we're making great progress, because we have amazing teachers, we have the best kids around. So we've got to keep thinking positive. Not in the 2 years I've been here have we cut a single program. They're all still there. So we're still in very good shape, and our achievement and culture climate scores are trending in the right direction. So typically, if we were to look over the last 20 years, from then until today, disregard any ebbs and flows in recent years, but just draw a line of best fit, it's typical for us to lose on average 9 students per year. Callie and I have budgeted to lose 10 students, although if the open enrollment trend continues, that may change. You can see our numbers from kindergarten through grade 12, and historically, on average, it's 20 students come over from non-public each year in grade 7, and sometimes a year or 2 before. So we followed the criteria that you see on the top of page 2. We are seeing before you some approximate savings in program adjustments of just over $900,000. The criteria that we used to guide these decisions or recommendations were to maintain programs and positions. We want to minimize impact on students, and we want to spread the adjustments throughout the system as best we can, knowing some people will be more heavily impacted than others. So, for example, in health insurance, the district's been working with the interest-based bargaining team and our assured partners to work towards a 4-tier insurance plan. That's what you see in this handout here. It has a significant savings for the district, although it does require those who participate in the program to pay more out of pocket than they have done in the past. Again, this has not been formally approved, but it is in conversation. We're trying to offset the cost for family insurance, which is a pretty significant increase, knowing that of all neighboring districts, our district contributes more. In this estimation here, there are 3 different suggestions. One is the 4-tier change. Another is to possibly eliminate a $600 stipend for those who only have single insurance. And that stipend doesn't go to your administrators, but just for certified staff. And that would save approximately $38,000. And then eliminating the practice of covering the full family insurance for 3 employees that had been agreed upon in 2006 for a savings of approximately $25,000. Transportation and operations have made the suggestion that we reduce 2 of the 3 afternoon shuttles and maintain 1 shuttle in both the morning and the afternoon. The shuttle would operate only between 4 attendance centers. So students would have to gather at any one of the 4 attendance centers, so they can pick up a shuttle, and it would literally route continuously between the buildings. We do carry students beyond what is required in state law, and we think that's important for our families. We also know that in times of budget cuts, we really have to consider the whole system, and thus the recommendation of cutting back those extra shuttles still gives parents who are in dire need an option, but it is a much less expensive option. And we may have families that said, hey, the bus was convenient, I was happy to take it, but I can just as easily drop the students on my way to work. At any rate, that will be a savings of about $56,000, and Director of Operations has suggested we eliminate 1 half-time custodian for an additional $14,000 savings, a total of $70,000 in transportation. Summer school, we're recommending we reduce the number of staff that provide that programming. For para-educators, we're recommending there's a possibility we can adjust the daily hours worked so that they more closely match when students are actually in the building. So for example, you might be a para-educator that would come either 30 minutes before students arrive and then be on site when students are here. You could be a para that may be scheduled to arrive when students arrive, and then you would put in your time after school. You would be paid for 7 hours and have a 30-minute duty-free lunch. Many of our paras are on 8 hours, and that reduction would save $108,000. It will mean there could be additional supervision from other certified staff for students to be safe. And the principals are considering now whether they can maybe have someone come just 20 minutes ahead of the start of school when the doors open for kids. Maybe they stay just 10 minutes after. So we're trying to entertain options that would save us. Again, that's 6 figures. The school secretaries have been recommended that they reduce their 216 days to 206. We'd like offices to open August 1. If they worked all day that schools were in session and had the typical breaks that they currently have, they would work until the last Friday in June. We're suggesting that if we cut that by 10 days or 2 weeks, they would have a chance to be here ahead of the teachers and the new staff, and then a few days behind. Again, it's a reduction for them. They would be paid for just 206 days and 216. We had one year-round secretary that we were recommending be reduced from 260 days to 216. And we would have her serve also as the summer school secretary and help us with some of our special education counts. Again, she would be August 1 to June 30th. We recommended that we replace the 260-day agreement with the 216-day agreement for the assistant director for activities. That would leave the only employees with year-round contracts of 260 days would be those that work at the central office for the most part. In addition, then would be the principals, and then operations, buildings and grounds, maintenance staff. The teacher leadership and compensation, we'd like to phase that program out over the next 1 year. Although we've made some pretty significant gains with our current structure, even though we did cut it back last year, we're recommending that we cut that back again so that we can flex an additional $260,000 back into the adjusted budget. We would split the current lead teacher and then require instructional coaches to teach 1 or 2 classes per day, perhaps more, but we're hoping no more than 2. And then we'd still be able to provide stipends for PLC teacher leaders, mentoring and induction. We would eliminate the stipends for the span of care support. On the third and final page, we would recommend that the certified nursing assistant program be discontinued for a savings of $8,000 with our new regional career center. That class will be covered as part of the health sciences strand. And in visiting with the teacher, she is going to explore the opportunity of offering it as a community ed course. Using their facility, that would enable her access to their state-of-the-art facility, and it's quite impressive. I toured it last week, and so that would be a better experience for our kids as well. We're recommending that we reallocate $175,000 out of our talented and gifted budget, and then reduce the hours of 2 administrative support staff at central services as well. As of the creation of this paper, the estimated tax increase was $1,293 to $384. I did hear maybe an adjustment with that, Callie.
Yeah, we took, instead of putting 1.6 into management, we took 1.3 million.
And that would get us to $13 and did you say 34?
Like 35, 38 cents. Yeah, right around in there.
So that's an improvement if we make an adjustment in the management fund.
Yep.
So we do have a number of students on IEPs. It has increased by a percentage or 2 in the last couple of years. Right now, we're at 17.8. Of course, we're not making any decisions tonight, but those recommended changes get us to just over $900,000.
Tax rate gets us the rest of it.
And yes, so for the cash reserves and management fund, that's the only way we can recuperate that money. That will do it. Now, you also heard Travis say that based upon our weighting moving forward, it's possible some of that $1.2 million deficit will naturally come back down. It really should be half and perhaps less than half of what it is now. And I think we can work towards that while we still provide support to our students. We want to make sure that we have associates here when students are in the building. We want to make sure that we have supervision when students are coming into the building, when students are going out. And that's why maybe staggering that 7 hours could be helpful. And we're working on getting some of our students that have had specialized bus transportation which I understand after talking to our transportation staff, it's increased fairly significantly in the last 3 or 4 years. So we're hoping we can begin to work some of that door-to-door service back a bit and see if we can still be able to get the kids here, work closely with parents for their ability to help with that as well, and get back to one bus, which is the way I understood it to be for many years. All of those are proposed into the future.
And a question we didn't really talk about, and I know we've talked about it in the past, but we kind of see this as like year 2 of 3 of making some suggested.
That would be my recommendation. You know, last year we were right up under 800,000 in our adjustments. This year, because we kind of bit the bullet last year, we're able now to fine tune what we think is fine tuning, and certainly no one likes change and no one wants to do more with less. We all understand that. But we can't continue to spend at this level when our enrollment count is dropping and we need to graduate and give raises to our current staff. That's critically important. And we want to be able to do so with what we see are only minimal amounts from the state of Iowa at 2.5 to 3. It still barely covers the cost of living. So we want to be able to do that, and yet we're doing it just like our groceries cost more this year than they did 5 years ago. So does our gasoline, our heating, our cooling, and everything else that we use to operate buildings. So it's a delicate dance when our enrollment is slightly dropping. But again, if we follow, history is a pretty good predictor of the future. And in the last 20 years, the line of best fit is going to put us around 9 or 10 kiddos. If we can get back on that trend and we can plan forward, I think there are things that we can do and still maintain great programs for our kids.
So thinking back to last year, is there anything that, right, like was this kind of a trajectory of us going into the red 5 years back, or was there some event or series of events that you think that brought us to all of a sudden we're having this? It feels like, whoa, we've never had to have these types of conversations before.
When I first arrived, I was aware that last year's cuts would be critical. I wasn't made aware until last summer when Callie joined the team that there were actually some adjustments that needed to be made to properly categorize some of the expenditures. And then when that was done, it resulted in a significant increase in the special education deficit. That's primary. Most of our paras are paid for out of the special education pool. Not all of them, but the overwhelming majority are. We also didn't foresee that the management fund would not have been replenished. Some of those corrections are what you're seeing now, but not all of them. And so that's where you're seeing kind of a systemic look. And I do predict that next year you may be in a bit of a similar position. Certainly, I don't think quite as high as this one, but I see a third year yet of adjustments. Again, that'll all be a lot easier if our kids open enrolling out would come back to us as best we can keep them here, tout the fine programs that we have. There are so many things I can't even name them when I walk through the buildings that I see going on. So combat that negative chatter because it can do some serious damage.
But it sounds like it would also positively help us that would be the easiest and best form of cash flow back into the district.
Right, it's the easiest to invest in. There's only one way to fix the problem that we're in right now. We have to have increased resources, which are kids, and we have to have decreased spending, which is what you're seeing here. A good balance of both of those things, we're going to be fiscally sound. I did hear Travis talk about 8 to 15%. Your current board policy says 10 to 15%, with 10 being the floor, 15 being the ceiling. We really don't like to have a solvency ratio higher than that. Again, more important even than solvency ratio is our unspent authorized balance and our cash. And we're spending that down much quicker than we should be. because it's very difficult to build back up. And when we lose that authority, it's a real challenge. And it can become, for some districts, a negative spiral. I think we can avoid it. It's not gloom and doom, but it does mean we have to get serious about tightening our belts. That would be the way I would explain it if I were explaining it to my neighbor. I just have to get serious about tightening our belt.
Do those percentages have any impacts on our ability to like bond for things in the future? For facility?
They would, yes. If we start getting below that 8, it gets a little dicey because it's saying, hey, you're not living within your means. So we want to, it's a little bit like a credit score in some respects, you know, we want to be able to say, yep, we're staying ahead of the game, we're managing our money well, we're a good risk here. Lower credit score, not such a good risk. So yeah, it can have an indirect, and I would even call it direct in some cases.
Anybody else have any questions? Anything else that we need to cover for that?
On this topic, I think we've got it covered. As always, I'm available for any questions that you have. Reach out to me, give me a phone call. I say that often to every message I send to staff and others, including yourselves.
Sure.
Callie and I are happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay. The last item of discussion is the number 4 NCC conference application update.
And as you're aware, we have had, on Thursday, February 29th, we received the response from the executive board of the NCC conference. Dana and I received it and immediately met and started to think about what our next steps might be. In lieu of her presenting tonight, I said, you know what, if you give me a paragraph kind of describing your conversations and our conversations. So what I'm sharing with you now is thanks to our director, Dana Sullivan. So we were declined. Now the executive board, which is composed of the superintendents in each of those districts, only one of those can vote nay. And unfortunately, and have it still pass. In our case, it was 2. So we are not able at this time to join them. Our next step is to continue communication with the superintendents and activity directors of the NCC schools so we can gather some knowledge and insight as to the reasons behind those dissenting votes. We're going to continue the strong communication with NCC to determine maybe there's some barriers we can overcome. Maybe there were some barriers not only that we could overcome, but that we could mitigate somehow in some agreements moving forward. Also, Dana is going to be in communication with the directors at the state level for the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union and the Iowa High School Athletic Association for the boys. We're going to get some input from them, and we're going to see what our recommendations for next steps might be. This isn't the end of the world. This is just a chance to say, all right, that didn't work as we had hoped. What is it we can do now moving forward so that we can ensure our kids have a good, solid, competitive conference to participate in?
That's what I'm going to affect until 25, 26 school year.
Correct. So not this August, but the following August.
Waiting on that.
Yeah, we're gonna just, we're kind of at the pause for a moment. As I said, Dana's been very active in getting input, and we're gonna see what we can do, reaching out. I will meet with the other superintendents in the next couple of weeks. Let's see where that goes. And she's already meeting with others. So here we go.
Questions? Josh? Jim?
Just one quick comment for Ann and Callie. They've done a ton of work sitting in those finance committee meetings with the folks from Piper Jaffray that are doing everything they can to keep that pencil really sharp. Neither one of them enjoys having to make these discussions or consider these kind of adjustments, but they're trying their dangest to keep it as close to the belt as they can. So job well done by both of them.
When's the next meeting?
18th, March 18th is our next meeting. And then your next meeting with the interest-based problem-solving group is the last Wednesday of this month. So we'll be able to make, and Callie should have some good estimates by then. So we're hopeful that we can have some decisions made in April.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions, thoughts, or comments from the
And
agenda?
one, I would just say, in March, we just have the one board meeting as opposed to other months where we have two, other than December and July.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn at 5:52.
Second.
1 second.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.